Hello there. Welcome to Scenario 100, where every story begins with 100. Day 1. Arrival on the Red Planet. The vibrations of the spacecraft finally stop. After a 7-month journey through deep space, I step out of the airlock and set foot on Mars. The ground is a dusty red desert stretching as far as the eye can see. The sky isn't blue anymore. It's a faint orange, almost surreal. I came here as part of the first wave of colonists. Earth was changing fast. Rising sea levels, resource shortages, and political chaos pushed humanity to look toward the stars. We are not explorers anymore, we are settlers. Our base is a dome-shaped habitat pre-delivered by unmanned cargo missions months earlier. My first task is to power it up. Check oxygen levels and make sure the radiation shielding is working. The temperature outside is 60 C, so stepping out without a suit isn't an option. I plant a small Earth flag in the Martian soil, not to claim land, but as a reminder of where I came from. Tomorrow, he'll begin setting up the greenhouse module. That greenhouse will be my food and oxygen lifeline for the months to come. Day 2, first night, first realization. I didn't sleep well. The sound of the air filters the creaking of the structure under Martian wind. It's unfamiliar. I realize how silent Earth actually was at night. Here silence is dangerous. It could mean something has stopped working. I start assembling the first water extraction unit. It works by heating the regolith to release trapped moisture. If I can get it running properly, it'll have a sustainable water source by day 10. I also take note of solar panel performance. Dust accumulation is already visible. You'll have to clean them regularly to avoid losing power. Looking out the dome's window, I can see the sun much smaller and dimmer than on Earth. It hits me. I'm alone on a planet 225 million kilometers away. But this is what I signed up for. Day 3, first EVA. Extravehicular activity. Today, I put on my suit and step outside for the first EVA. My objective set: up external oxygen tanks and deploy radiation sensors. I also take some soil samples for the lab module. The surface feels strange beneath my boots, soft dust with harder rock underneath. The low gravity makes each step feel like a slow-motion jump. I can see the rim of a small crater in the distance. I mark it on my map for exploration on day 15. Once the basic systems are stable, by the end of the day, I manage to secure the outer perimeter with sensors and small reflectors for navigation in dust storms. Back inside, the recycled air tastes metallic, but it's breathable. That's progress. Day 4, breathing space. Day 35. I also check oxygen production and pressure levels. Any leak here could be deadly. I make a note to recheck all seals and valves on day 20 as a routine safety protocol. Outside, the temperature barely rises above 55 C during the day. The suit's heater keeps me alive, but power is precious. I need to optimize every watt. Survival here is not about strength, it's about precision. Day 5. Communication. Lag. Almost half an hour later, isolation is real here, physical and emotional. I receive a checklist from Mission Control to begin calibrating the oxygen recycling unit and COS scrubbers. I also perform a minor repair on one of the solar panels after noticing a drop in power. Look up through the small dome window. Earth is just a tiny blue dot in the black sky. It doesn't feel like home anymore. Mars is slowly becoming my new reality. Day 6. Silence between worlds. The mornings here don't really feel like mornings. The sun rises weakly, casting a dull orange glow that barely pierces the thin Martian atmosphere. I wake up to the sound of the life support fans humming like an endless heartbeat. That sound is my reminder. If it ever stops, so do I. Today, I spend most of my time running diagnostics on the greenhouse temperature controls. The hydroponic rack is holding steady, but the humidity levels are fluctuating more than expected. If they're not stable by day 15, you'll need to rewire the circulation fans manually. I also scheduled the first soil experiment to begin on day 12. You'll mix local regolith with nutrient solutions to test if it can support crops long term. If it fails, you'll have to rely only on hydroponics. If it works, it could mean scalable agriculture on Mars day 7. Dust and power. A weak dust storm rolls in today, my first real weather event here. I can't hear the wind, but I can feel the structure vibrating softly. Outside, visibility drops quickly, so I cancel any EVA plans and stay inside. This is the first big test for the solar array. Dust accumulation cuts power by 20 in a matter of hours. I make a note to manually clean the panels on day 8 once it's safe to go out. If this happens during a stronger storm, the power drop could be critical. As night falls, the storm continues. I double-check all seals, power storage, and oxygen reserves. If I've learned anything here, it's this: Mars doesn't care if I live or die. Day 8. First dust cleanup. The storm settles overnight. I suit up early in the morning and step out into the pale red dawn. A fine layer of dust coats everything like ash. Each panel needs to be gently wiped down. One wrong move, and I could scratch the surface, reducing efficiency permanently. The process takes hours. The air feels even thinner today, though that's just my perception. The pressure sensors are stable. I install a new sensor node near the southern ridge to track wind patterns. If I can understand local storm cycles, I'll be better prepared for the next one. Before heading back in, I take a moment to look around. The landscape is empty, silent, and cold, but strangely beautiful. Day 9. First signs of life. The greenhouse finally gives me something in return for all the effort. Tiny green sprouts push through the nutrient gel. They're small, fragile really, but they're alive. On a planet that's dead and frozen, this is a powerful feeling. I log every detail carefully: growth rate, oxygen levels, nutrient use. If the plants thrive, they'll become a major oxygen contributor by day 35. If they fail, you'll need to increase COB scrubbing and ration stored oxygen. I also make some maintenance adjustments to the habitat's thermal system. The external temperature has dropped lower than average. I plan to reinforce the insulation panels on day 14, just before the coldest expected night of this rotation. Day 10. The weight of distance. Today, communication with Earth feels different. The messages come in like letters from another lifetime. I know the people sending them are moving on with their lives while I count each Martian day by the hum of machines. I record my daily report. Water production is stable, oxygen is steady, and greenhouse activity shows positive signs. But emotionally, it's heavy. Therese, no sound out here except my breathing and the occasional creak of the dome. At night, I sit by the small observation window again. Earth is still that faint blue dot, but it seems a little smaller every day. I tell myself this: I didn't come here to feel comfortable. I came here to build something new. Day 11. First steps. Beyond the dome. Immediate perimeter of the habitat. My suit checklist takes nearly 40 minutes. Oxygen tanks, full comms, operational emergency beacon synced rover battery at 94. I drive the rover about 15 kilometers northeast to scout a rocky outcrop I saw on orbital imagery before the mission. The silence out here is louder than anything. The rover hums gently, my own breathing echoes inside the helmet. I collect rock samples and log GPS markers for potential construction materials. If this site proves stable, I'll begin transporting materials here on day 18 for a long-term storage shelter. When I return to the habitat, I feel the weight of the suit come off like gravity itself has loosened its grip. But this planet doesn't forgive mistakes. Every meter away from the dome is a risk I can't take lightly. Day 12. Soil experiments begin. Today is a big milestone: regolith. Agriculture trials. I mix crushed Martian regolith with a measured nutrient solution and small amounts of earth compost stored in sealed containers. The pH levels are not ideal, but they're within workable limits. I plant a row of fast-growing crops and set up additional sensors to measure moisture retention. These experiments will determine if Mars can truly host life, not just tolerate it. The first meaningful results should appear around day 25. Meanwhile, the solar arrays continue to collect power efficiently after the storm cleanup. I take a mental note to schedule a full panel inspection for day 20, day 13. Shadows of isolation. It's strange how routine can make the impossible feel normal. Wake up, check on, inspect greenhouse, eat prepackaged rations, log every system reading. But beneath this rhythm, something grows: silence. I feel the edges of loneliness sharper today. I speak to the microphone during my daily logs just to hear a human voice, even if it's my own. In the afternoon, I spend time calibrating the rover's navigation system and uploading terrain scans to the onboard AI. If the comms go down, I need the rover to guide me home autonomously. Outside, the red dust swirls in soft spirals. It's beautiful and cruel. Day 14. The cold night approaches. Forecasts predict the coldest night so far. Mars doesn't have weather the way Earth does. It has silence that freezes everything I reinforce. The insulation panels double-check heater circuits and install a backup battery pack in case of a thermal system failure. I also move the sprouting plants closer to the habitat's core, where temperature is more stable. If the temperature drops too low during the night, they won't survive. Before sleeping, I adjust the automated systems to alert me immediately if the temperature falls below critical thresholds. Tonight might test everything I've built. Day 15. Holding the line. The night is long. The temperature drops lower than expected, reaching a dangerous 7-8 outside. Ice forms on the inner edges of the external dome. But the systems hold. The heaters stay on, the battery doesn't fail, and the plants survive. This is the first time I've truly felt like I defended my habitat. Not just maintained it, defended it. I celebrate with a small breakfast ration and send a status report to Earth. I won't hear back for hours, but that's fine. I know the data will speak for itself. Next step: preparing for larger-scale energy storage by day 21 and beginning the material transport operation by day 18. Day 16. The sound of breathing. Therese, something unsettling about realizing that every breath I take depends on a thin layer of machinery. Only then am I allowed to live. Today, I do my first full oxygen system maintenance. I strip the outer shell of the main scrubber, replace the filter mesh, and run a pressure integrity check on all joints. A single microfracture in one of these valves could end me before I even have time to react. In the afternoon, I spend an hour outside the dome inspecting the structural anchors. Martian dust creeps into every bolt and seal, and if it isn't cleared, it could compromise the habitat's frame during the next storm. I schedule a full perimeter sweep for day 23. Before sleeping, I sit by the viewport and stare at the sky. There are no stars tonight, just a red haze swallowing the horizon. Day 17. Mapping the Red Desert. I set out early to extend the exploration radius. The rover is now fully mapped with auto-return navigation. So I push out to a 5-kilometer perimeter. The terrain becomes rockier with sharp ridges that could be useful for construction or shielding from radiation. I map several points of interest using geotags. One in particular, a large basalt wall formation, might be perfect for a secondary outpost, something. I plan to begin around day 40 if resources allow. On the way back, I stop the rover and step out just to listen. Of course, there's nothing to hear, just the vacuum pressing against my suit. But that nothingness is what makes Mars so alive. Day 18, first construction. Mission. Today, I begin transporting regolith blocks from the site I scouted earlier to build a small external storage shelter. The goal is to reduce the risk of clutter inside the main dome and make space for long-term expansion. Each trip takes nearly 3 hours. Gravity here is lower, so carrying weight isn't the problem. The problem is stamina. The suit is heavy, the air is thin, and every movement is deliberate. By evening, the foundation is laid. A modest wall of packed regolith blocks anchored with metal rods. I plan to continue work on day 21, but I already see the shape of a colony forming, not just survival structure. Day 19. Power games. Solar power has been stable for 2 weeks, but I know better than to trust stability on Mars. Today, I reconfigure the energy grid, installed a second-tier capacitor bank, rewired emergency heating into an isolated circuit, set up the power monitoring AI to trigger alerts at 20 threshold. I also experiment with a small methane fuel cell prototype, a backup system in case dust storms cut solar intake completely. It won't power everything, but it might keep life support running for 48 hours at night. I log a note to fully test the backup generator on day 26. Day 20 ritual of routine. 20 days. It's strange. When I arrived, every sound, every step, every shadow felt alien. Now it's all ritual. Check air. Check power. Feed plants. Clean dust. Repeat. The sprouts in the greenhouse are growing faster than I hoped. I transfer the strongest seedlings into separate trays, marking them with their respective nutrient profiles. These will be my first real crop yield around day 35-40. In the evening, I walk outside without a specific task. Just to exist out there, I kneel on the dust, look up at the pale sky, and realize I'm not just surviving Mars anymore, I'm living here. I return to the habitat and record one last line in the log. If humanity ever thrives here, it'll start with routines like this. Day 21. Laying the bones of a colony. The sun rises weakly over the horizon, bathing the surface in a pale reddish-gold light. Today's mission is all about expansion. The storage shelter. I started building on day 18 is finally ready for reinforcement. I spend most of the morning mixing regolith with a polymer bonding agent to create crude but sturdy bricks. They're rough, but on Mars, rough is enough. With the rover loaded, I make several trips back and forth, stacking the walls higher, sealing the cracks with insulation foam, and placing the support rods. The structure won't be pressurized, not yet, but it doesn't need to be. Its purpose is simple: to keep equipment safe from dust storms and temperature swings. Once it's fully enclosed by day 27, you'll be able to store my EVA gear, tools, and power units there. By the time I return to the dome, I'm covered in a thin layer of Martian dust. It clings to everything. I brush it off, slowly, carefully. The airlock doesn't forgive carelessness. Day 22. Heat, cold, and the space between. One thing about Mars, no one can truly prepare for the brutal temperature swings. Even inside the habitat, the thermal systems strain to keep the air stable. I wake up to an alarm. Internal temperature dropped by 23°C overnight. I spend the day rewiring the heater insulation system, adding an extra layer of reflective sheeting to the dome interior. This should help trap heat during the night. I also patch a minor crack in the east-facing thermal panel. Nothing serious. But in this environment, small problems are never just small. The plants in the greenhouse seem unfazed. Their temperature control system is more robust than mine. In fact, they've grown noticeably taller. I schedule the first trimming and nutrient flush for day 30, when they'll be mature enough to yield. At night, I sit by the viewport with a cup of recycled water and just breathe. Earth feels far, but my breath feels steady. Day 23. Perimeter sweep. This is the full perimeter check I scheduled back on day 16. I put on the suit, step outside, and make a slow clockwise circuit around the habitat. Every anchor point, every bolt, every thermal strap gets inspected. I find 2 anchor bolts partially loosened by wind vibration. That's exactly why these sweeps matter. I tighten them, reseal the joints, and mark their positions for a follow-up check on day 50. While out there, I also test the new motion sensor beacons. They don't detect intruders. There are none here, but they're invaluable for tracking dust movement patterns during storms. As I return, I glance at the distant basalt ridge. It still feels like an unfinished chapter, waiting for me to write it. Day 24. First signs of stress. The human mind is a strange thing. For days, everything has been smooth, almost too smooth. But today I felt it. A weight. A whisper at the back of my thoughts. It's not fear. It's the quiet realization of how alone I am. No footsteps outside the dome, no birds, no wind in the trees. Just my heartbeat and the hiss of oxygen filters. I spend the day working on EVA tasks to drown it out. I inspect the rover's suspension and recalibrate the terrain mapping software. I even clean the inside of the dome meticulously just to keep moving. Before sleep, I record a private log, not for Earth, just for me. Mars doesn't fight you, it waits, and that's worse. Day 25. Living systems. Today, the soil experiment I started on day 12 shows its first clear signs of success. 3 of the 6 regolith crop trays have sprouted healthy seedlings. The nutrient balance is imperfect, but it's working. That means Mars soil with help can sustain life. I carefully record all metrics: root strength, moisture, retention. Future of colony-scale farming. By day 35, these plants should reach their first harvest stage if everything goes right. I also clean and recalibrate the solar array, making sure efficiency remains high before the next storm season approaches. In the evening, I allow myself something rare: a long lookout. The window, without a task in mind. The dust swirls softly in the distance, and the stars finally peek through the thin atmosphere. It doesn't feel like I'm visiting anymore. It feels like I'm settling. Day 26. First agricultural success. This morning, I rushed to the greenhouse right after waking up. A few of the seeds I planted days ago had sprouted tiny green leaves, fragile but alive, on Mars. This isn't just a plant. It's a symbol of something much bigger. It's proof that life can grow here if we help it. I adjusted the irrigation system, checked the oxygen sensors, and turned on the fans. These plants are not just food, they're hope. Day 27, psychological turbulence. Today was heavy. The silence that once calmed me now pressed down like a weight. For the first time, I truly felt the distance between myself and Earth. I looked up at the dark red sky, searching for that pale blue dot. That dot is everything I once called home. The feeling is strange, torn between pride for being here and a quiet, creeping loneliness. Writing in my log and keeping a strict routine is the only thing holding my mind together. Day 28. Resource management. Today, I did a full check of my energy, oxygen, and water reserves. I noticed a thin layer of dust covering some of the solar panels. Dangerous in the long run. Less sunlight means less power. So I suited up, went outside, and cleaned them carefully. Out here, one small failure in the chain can lead to everything collapsing. Every detail matters. Every bolt, every panel. Day 29, first night walk. Tonight I finally did it. I stepped outside after dark. The Martian night is quiet but not silent. To res a thin, eerie whistle from the wind. The stars above look sharper than on Earth, like someone carved them into the sky. The thin atmosphere lets everything shine clearer. I watched my breath fog the inside of my helmet, and for a moment, I felt like an ancient explorer walking on a new world. Day 30. A new purpose. Tomorrow marks one full month on Mars. 30 days. Mars is to understand it, to make it part of my story. I came here out of curiosity, but I stay because I'm building a place where life can grow. Day 31. Mapping the area. Today I left the habitat early with the rover. I've been staying close for safety, but it's time to map the nearby terrain more thoroughly. My destination was a rocky ridge about 3 kilometers away. Driving over the rust-colored dust felt surreal, like exploring an alien desert with no horizon. I used my scanner to map potential sites for water extraction. If I can set up a secondary power station near a water-rich zone, I could secure long-term survival. On the way back, I noticed how quickly the landscape changes with light. Mars hides its beauty in silence. Day 32. Maintenance day. I spent most of the day maintaining the systems. The airlock seals are showing signs of wear, small but dangerous. On Mars, even a millimeter-wide crack could kill you. I reinforced the seals with spare insulation and recalibrated the CO2 scrubbers. I also checked the greenhouse. The plants are growing steadily, though I'll need to rotate the trays soon to ensure they get even light exposure. I made a note to do that on day 35, day 33. First storm warning. The weather sensors picked up rising wind speeds in the early morning. A dust storm is forming on the horizon. Mars storms are not like Earth's. They're quieter but last much longer. If this one grows big enough, it could block sunlight for days, meaning no solar power. I secured all external equipment, reinforced the greenhouse panels, and locked down the rover's charging station. Survival here isn't about fighting nature, it's about preparing for it. Day 34. Storm hits. The storm arrived. Before dawn, I woke to the sound of the habitat frame vibrating. The wind outside isn't as strong as a hurricane on Earth, but the dust is relentless. Fine, dry, and clinging to everything. I switched the base to low-power mode to conserve energy. Inside, everything is dim. It's strange how the storm makes me feel trapped, even though I've been isolated since the beginning. I checked on the greenhouse through the camera system. The plants seem stable for now. Day 35. After the storm. By morning, the storm began to ease. When I finally stepped outside, the world was buried under a soft layer of red dust. Everything looked like it had been forgotten for centuries. I cleaned the solar panels first without power. Nothing works here. Then I rotated the greenhouse trays just like I planned. The sprouts had survived the storm. Seeing that tiny patch of green, after all that red, it felt like seeing Earth again. Out here, survival is fragile, but every time Mars tests me, I come out stronger. Day 36. Expanding the greenhouse. The storm reminded me how fragile my system is. One power shortage, one bad seal, and everything could collapse. So, today I began expanding the greenhouse. I unpacked one of the inflatable habitat modules, lightweight and designed for modular growth. Connecting it to the main greenhouse wasn't easy. Mars dust sticks to every seal, every joint. But after a few hours of careful work, I managed to secure the structure and begin oxygen cycling. This new section will allow me to grow more plants, not just for food, but for oxygen too. On day 45, I'll start planting new seeds here. Day 37. A message from Earth. Communication with Earth is always delayed, but today I received a long message from Mission Control, mostly technical updates, but at the end there was something personal, a short recorded message from my family. Their faces, their voices, 20 minutes late across the void. It hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I felt like I wasn't alone on this planet. Then the signal faded and silence filled the room again. Mars doesn't care about your feelings, but that message reminded me why I came here. Day 38, solar panel, realignment. With the storm gone, I noticed the energy production levels were still lower than expected. The panels had shifted slightly during the storm. So today, I realigned every unit to the optimal angle for maximum sunlight. It's tedious work, but vital. Without full power, I can't run the heaters at night, and without heat, the greenhouse could freeze. I made a note to build an automated alignment system by day 60. That would save me from doing this manually every few weeks. Day 39. The cold of Mars. Last night was colder than usual. Even with heating, frost formed around the edges of the greenhouse windows. I could see my breath in the airlock when I suited up this morning. I checked the temperature logs. It dropped lower than predicted. If this keeps happening, I'll need to install additional insulation. Mars doesn't have a forgiving climate. It tests you every single day. I spent the rest of the day reinforcing the habitats, thermal shielding with spare panels. It's not perfect, but it should buy me time. Day 40. Signs of routine. Something strange happened today. Everything felt normal. I woke up, checked the systems, tended to the plants, cleaned the panels, logged my data, and drank recycled water like it was coffee back home. This was once a terrifying alien world, but now it's becoming routine. Not easy, but familiar. I even caught myself humming while working. That's new. I marked a note for day 50. If all goes well, I'll attempt my first long-range exploration. I want to push farther to see what lies beyond this tiny bubble of human life on Mars. Mars hasn't changed. I have day 41. testing the rover for long trips. Today I began preparing the rover for the journey I've been planning for weeks. On day 50, I want to travel several kilometers away from the habitat to explore a nearby ridge that shows unusual mineral readings. The rover isn't built for comfort, but it's reliable. I ran a full diagnostic on its power systems: oxygen supply, emergency shelter module, and communication uplink. The most critical part is energy. The farther I go, the more carefully I'll have to calculate every watt of power to ensure I can return. I also loaded a few emergency rations and oxygen canisters. Mars isn't forgiving to explorers. Day 42, first signs of pollination. The greenhouse surprised me today. Some of the early crop flowers started pollinating naturally. That's huge here on Mars, even something as simple. As pollination isn't guaranteed, I carefully documented the process, then manually assisted with a small brush to ensure a stronger yield. If everything continues as planned, I might be able to harvest the first full batch of food around day 65. That would mark the moment I officially become partly self-sufficient, no longer just surviving on stored rations. Day 43, the weight of isolation. Some days, the silence feels louder than anything. I sat in the observation dome looking out at the red dust plains. Nothing. No trees, no birds, no movement. Just the planet and me. It's a strange feeling to know you're the only living human for millions of kilometers. I recorded a log to keep my mind grounded. I also wrote a letter I'll send to Earth in the next data package. Even if it takes 20 minutes to get there, writing it makes me feel less alone. Day 44, oxygen system. Upgrade. Today was a technical day. I upgraded the oxygen recycling unit to increase its efficiency by 8. It might not sound like much, but on Mars, 8 can be the difference between life and death. This will reduce my dependency on stored reserves and give me more freedom for longer excursions. I've scheduled a stress test for day 49 to make sure it can handle the extra load once I start using more power for exploration. Day 45, a red sunset. I ended the day outside the habitat, standing on the rocky ground, just watching the sunset. Unlike Earth, Mars sunsets are blue, soft, faint blue light fading into deep crimson skies. It's beautiful, alien, and quietly overwhelming. I whispered to myself, I live here now. Before heading back in, I marked a new goal in my log by day 75. I want to build a small external shelter near the ridge, a second safe zone. It would be my first step toward expanding my presence on Mars. On Mars, even the sunsets remind you that everything is different, but it can still be beautiful. Day 46. All about preparation. I reviewed the rover's systems once again: battery levels, navigation software, oxygen supply, and emergency beacons. I also packed essential tools, extra food rations, and spare parts for both the rover and the greenhouse. Every gram counts. The rover can't handle unnecessary weight. I studied the route to the ridge, carefully noting potential hazards: steep slopes, soft regolith patches, and rock formations that could damage the wheels. I also scheduled regular check-ins with the habitat so that if anything goes wrong, automated alerts will trigger a backup plan. Day 47, supplies and safety checks, double-checking the emergency. Supplies became my focus. Today, I prepared a small portable oxygen unit and verified the suit integrity under simulated stress conditions. I even ran a mini dry run on the rover for a short loop around the habitat to confirm the navigation system works under extreme conditions. Nothing is trivial here. Each calculation, each test could save my life. I also reviewed the storm forecasts. The next week looks clear. giving me a safe window for the long trip. Day 48. Mental preparation. Exploring further than ever before requires not just physical readiness, but mental fortitude. I spent the day reviewing previous logs, mapping out contingencies, and meditating. The isolation on Mars isn't just physical. It's psychological. I need to stay calm, disciplined, and alert at all times. The ridge isn't just rocks and dust. It's a test of my endurance skills and survival instincts. Today, I ran a full stress test of the oxygen recycling unit and power systems. Everything performed perfectly. I also did a final inspection of the greenhouse, rotated the trays, and ensured the solar panels were clean and aligned. One last check on the rover tires, suspension, and navigation software, and I was ready. Tomorrow, I'll begin the journey. Everything is packed, mapped, and ready. Day 50. First long-range rover mission. I check my systems one last time. Oxygen levels, communications, navigation, and emergency beacons. The rover hums to life. I take a deep breath and start moving toward the ridge about 5 kilometers away. The wind blows softly, carrying dust in long ribbons. I keep checking my instruments constantly. Every slope, every loose patch of soil is a potential risk. Halfway there, I stop to take soil and rock samples. The data could reveal hidden water sources or minerals that may become crucial for future expansion. When I finally reach the ridge, I step out and look back at the habitat, a tiny bubble in the vast Martian desert. I feel a surge of accomplishment, not just surviving, not just living, but truly exploring. Mars doesn't wait. It tests. And today I passed the first test. Day 51. Surveying the ridge. I spent today carefully surveying the ridge I reached. Yesterday, the terrain is jagged with deep crevices and scattered rock formations. I place small marker flags to indicate stable areas for potential future outposts or resource caches. I also collect more rock and soil samples. Preliminary analysis suggests unusual mineral deposits, possibly useful for construction or even extracting trace elements for experiments. Each sample is cataloged meticulously. Day 52. Mapping and navigation. Using the rover's sensors and cameras, I create a high-resolution 3D map of the surrounding area. This will be essential for planning long-term routes and locating resources. I notice a small crater to the northwest. It could be a natural shelter against wind and dust storms. I mark it for a future inspection on day 60. Back at the habitat, I upload all the data to the onboard AI for analysis. Day 53. First extended EVA on foot. Today, I take my first extended EVA on foot, leaving the rover behind temporarily, moving slowly over uneven terrain. I focus on close-up soil analysis and minor mineral collection. Every step is deliberate. Mars gravity is easier on the body but treacherous underfoot. I also test portable solar panels I brought to see if temporary energy sources could work for future field expeditions. Day 54. Returning to the habitat. I head back to the main habitat after a full day of exploration. The rover performed perfectly, and the oxygen and power levels held steady. Inside, I log all findings and update my greenhouse schedule. I rotate the trays and Check on the seedlings. They are thriving. Despite the harsh environment outside, inside the dome, life continues to grow. Day 55. Reflection and planning. After 5 days of intensive exploration, I sit by the observation window and reflect. I've learned about the terrain, discovered potential sites for expansion, and tested both my skills and equipment. The ridge is promising for future outposts. I make notes for day 60. I'll begin preparation for a small satellite outpost near the crater to the northwest. This will extend my operational range and provide an emergency shelter for longer missions. Mars isn't just a challenge, it's a teacher. Every step forward reveals a lesson we can't afford to ignore. Day 56. Preparing the site. Today, I begin preparing the small site near the crater marked on day 52. Using the rover, I transport lightweight modular panels, insulation sheets, and essential supplies. The terrain is uneven, requiring careful placement of each panel. I also dig shallow trenches for anchoring and wind protection. This outpost won't be pressurized like the main dome, but it will provide shelter storage and a staging area for extended exploration. I plan to complete basic setup by day 60, day 57, laying the foundation. I carefully arrange the foundation panels, making sure each piece interlocks tightly. Mars dust is everywhere, so I clean surfaces before assembly to prevent weak seals. I place emergency oxygen canisters and store some spare tools inside the temporary shelter, even though it's small. Having a second safe zone gives me a sense of security, an insurance policy against the unpredictable Martian environment. Day 58. Reinforcing and insulating. Today, I focus on insulation. Nights are extremely cold, and the minimal shelter must provide protection against frost and wind. I attach reflective sheets and cover exposed joints with polymer sealing tape. Every effort counts. A minor breach could allow heat to escape, putting the stored supplies at risk. I also conduct a thermal test overnight to ensure the temperature remains stable. Day 59. Equipment check and dry run. I spend the day running a dry operation. I move essential supplies between the main dome and the outpost, simulate extended stays, and check the emergency oxygen supply. I verify that all tools, lights, and communication systems function properly. This ensures that when I finally spend an entire night at the outpost, nothing will fail. Day 60. First overnight stay at the outpost. The first extended overnight stay at the field outpost begins. I bring food, water, and oxygen reserves and make sure the portable solar panels are optimally positioned. The first night is quiet but tense. I monitor temperatures, check the seals repeatedly, and ensure the communication uplink remains stable. It's uncomfortable, colder than the main dome, but I feel a profound sense of independence. For the first time, I'm truly operating beyond my base, a step toward establishing a multi-point colony on Mars. Every meter I move from the main dome is a victory. Mars is harsh, but I am learning its rhythm. Day 61. Greenhouse expansion. Monitoring. I begin the day by inspecting the expanded greenhouse section I set up on day 36. The new plants are thriving under the controlled environment, and the seedlings planted 5 days ago are showing strong growth. I adjust the lighting and humidity levels slightly to optimize photosynthesis. I also start cataloging growth patterns, noting which nutrient mixes produce the best results. By day 70, I plan to have enough crops to begin my first small harvest. Day 62. Water recycling. Optimization. Today, I focus on the water recycling system. The initial setup works well, but small leaks and inefficiencies are wasting precious water. I replace some tubing and recalibrate the filtration unit, ensuring that moisture from the greenhouse and habitat air is fully captured and reused. This refinement will be critical if I intend to maintain both the main habitat and the outpost over the next months. Day 63. Second rover test. I run a long-distance rover test, bringing it from the main habitat to the outpost and back multiple times. Each trip is measured carefully, logging energy consumption, wear on tires, and oxygen usage. I also check emergency response protocols in case the rover fails. Mid-route. Everything functions within expected parameters. The test gives me confidence to push farther during future explorations. Day 64. Soil analysis and resource mapping. Returning to the ridge and crater, I perform detailed soil analysis. I collect samples from multiple locations, checking mineral content, moisture levels, and potential contaminants. Preliminary results indicate areas where crops might be grown directly in Martian regolith if supplemented correctly. I also identify potential spots for future water extraction experiments. Each sample is logged meticulously in my onboard database. Greenhouse are finally ready for the first controlled harvest. Today, I prune older leaves, rotate trays for optimal light exposure, and prepare small containers for storing food. While the yield is modest, it marks a milestone, the first step toward self-sufficiency on Mars. I calculate rationing and note the oxygen contribution these plants provide to the habitat. It's not just food, it's life support. Every leaf harvested is a proof of survival, a reminder that life can thrive even in the harshest conditions. Day 66, pre-harvest inspection. Today, I carefully examine the greenhouse plants in preparation for the first harvest. The seedlings are robust leaves, deep green stems, strong. I check soil moisture, nutrient balance, and light exposure. Nothing can be left to chance. A single misstep could damage the fragile growth. I also take note of which trays perform best for future optimization. The harvest itself will begin tomorrow, but today is about planning and precision. Day 67, first harvest. The moment has arrived. I carefully cut and collect the mature leaves and stems, taking care not to damage nearby seedlings. The yield is modest enough for a few meals, but the psychological boost is enormous. Holding the first Mars-grown greens in my hands is surreal. They are not just food. They are proof that Mars can support life, that I am no longer solely dependent on Earth's supplies. After harvesting, I clean the greenhouse, rotate trays, and record detailed metrics. Day 68. Outpost extended. Today I spend my first extended period at the field outpost. I bring harvested greenswater and spare oxygen, testing the shelter's ability to support a night away from the main habitat. I monitor temperature, check seals, and ensure the communication uplink remains stable. The outpost is basic, but it works. This first overnight is a crucial test of long-term operational expansion. Day 69. Equipment upgrades. Returning to the main habitat, I focus on refining my systems. The greenhouse irrigation system is upgraded with additional sensors to better monitor humidity and water levels. The solar panels are cleaned and slightly realigned to optimize energy collection for the coming days. The rover is also checked and maintained in preparation for longer trips. These upgrades ensure that both the habitat and outpost can operate efficiently in tandem. Day 70. Psychological milestone. I spend the evening recording logs and reflecting. 70 days on Mars have transformed the landscape, not just physically but mentally. I no longer see this planet as alien. It is challenging, yes, but familiar. The greenhouse thrives, the outpost works, and the ridge exploration has opened new possibilities. I feel a sense of mastery, but also a respect for the planet's unforgiving nature. 70 days in Mars is no longer a distant dream. It is my world, my home, and my teacher. Day 71. Planning multi-day excursions. With the outpost operational and the greenhouse stable, I begin planning multi-day exploration trips. The goal is to push the boundaries of the mapped territory and test survival protocols for extended durations away from the main habitat. I calculate oxygen consumption, solar power availability, and emergency reserves. Supplies are packed meticulously. Food rations, spare filters, repair tools, and emergency shelters. Every calculation matters. Mars is unforgiving, and mistakes are costly. Day 72. Preparing the rover for long haul. I spend the day servicing the rover for extended travel. Tires are reinforced with additional metal mesh solar panels cleaned and communication systems tested at maximum range. I also attach a small storage pod for samples and emergency equipment. Each test run is logged and I simulate potential failures to ensure the rover can handle unexpected conditions. By evening, the vehicle is fully mission-ready. Day 73. Departure for Ridge Outpost. Today, I set out for a multi-day stay at the Ridge Outpost. The journey is tense. The rover navigates over rocky terrain, soft regolith, and hidden crevices. Each kilometer is monitored carefully, and I stop periodically to take samples and check oxygen and power levels. The vast emptiness around me is both humbling and inspiring. By nightfall, I reach the Ridge Outpost, set up a small sleeping and work area, and monitor environmental conditions. Day 74. Ridge Operations. At the outpost, I conduct detailed soil and mineral analysis. I find promising traces of minerals that could be useful for construction or scientific research. I also test small-scale solar collectors to see if energy can be harvested reliably at this location. The data is logged meticulously. For meals, I rely on a combination of stored rations and the small greens harvested from the main greenhouse, a reminder of how intertwined life support and exploration have become. Day 75. Reflection and future planning. The second night at the ridge gives me time to reflect. 75 days and I've grown more than plants. I've grown resilient skills and understanding. The Ridge Outpost proves that Mars can support distributed operations beyond a single dome. I plan future missions to push even farther and to develop semi-permanent outposts across the terrain. Tonight, I record in my log, Mars is vast, harsh, and unyielding. But every day I survive, explore, and learn it feels more like home. The journey has only just begun. Day 76. Resource Survey and Planning. I begin the day with a detailed survey of nearby terrain for potential resources. Using the rover's sensors, I map out mineral-rich areas and assess regolith quality for future construction. I identify a potential site for a small water extraction experiment near a shallow crater. This location could be key for longer-term sustainability. Notes are logged meticulously for a planned mission on Day 82. Day 77. Greenhouse Optimization. Back at the habitat, I check the greenhouse systems. The first harvest trays have been rotated and replaced with new seedlings. I adjust humidity, light exposure, and nutrient supply for optimal growth. I also start a small experiment, mixing regolith from different parts of the habitat perimeter to see which mixture yields the strongest growth. Early observations suggest minor differences, but the data will be crucial for scaling up future crops. Day 78. Outpost Maintenance. I return to the Ridge Outpost for a maintenance sweep. The solar panels are cleared of dust, insulation checked, and temporary storage reorganized. I also test small portable wind turbines I set up as an experiment for supplementary power generation. The harsh winds at the ridge may actually be beneficial if harnessed properly. Systems are stable, giving me confidence for longer multi-day stays. Day 79. Extended EVA and sample collection. Today, I take the rover further than before, about 7 kilometers from the main habitat, to collect additional soil and mineral samples. I carefully document each site with photos, GPS coordinates, and analytical readings. Some areas show promising traces of iron and magnesium, which could be useful for construction or scientific experiments. By evening, I return to the habitat exhausted but exhilarated with new data that will guide colony expansion. Day 80. Strategic planning and reflection. The day is dedicated to reviewing collected data and planning the next phase of colonization. The Ridge outpost is performing well. The greenhouse is producing steady growth, and the long-range rover missions have been successful. I draft plans for a secondary outpost further north, closer to a larger mineral deposit, and set goals for days 8590 for exploration, construction, and resource testing. Tonight, I sit by the observation window, looking at the red horizon. 75 days ago, Mars was alien. Today, it feels like a challenge. I'm ready to meet Mars tests, endurance, skill, and patience. Each success is small, but together they form the foundation of life beyond Earth. Day 81. Selecting the site. Today, I scout the location for the secondary outpost a few kilometers north of the main habitat near the mineral-rich deposit. Identified on day 76. The terrain is rough with scattered boulders and uneven ground. I evaluate anchor points, wind exposure and sunlight, availability for solar arrays. I mark precise locations for the main modules and emergency shelters. By evening, the site is fully mapped and a construction plan is drafted. For the coming days, day 82, water extraction experiment. I begin the water extraction experiment at the northern crater. Using a combination of regolith heating and condensation collection, I attempt to pull trace amounts of water from the soil. Early readings show small quantities collected, not enough for a full colony yet, but promising. I note efficiency improvements and schedule the next trial for day 84, aiming to increase output and test long-term feasibility. Day 83, transport and logistics. Today is dedicated to moving equipment and materials to the secondary outpost site. Using the rover, I transport insulation panels, modular habitat pieces, and emergency oxygen units. The journey is slow due to the rocky terrain, but progress is steady. I also set up temporary markers for solar arrays and begin laying the foundation for the primary module. By nightfall, the initial outline of the outpost is visible against the Martian horizon. Day 84, water extraction. Test 2. I run the second water extraction experiment. Adjusting the heating cycle and collection apparatus increases efficiency by nearly 25. While still not producing enough for sustained human habitation independently, this demonstrates that localized resource utilization is possible. I record all parameters meticulously, noting temperature cycles, soil, moisture content, and condensation yield. This experiment will guide future outpost construction and long-term water strategies. Day 85. Construction begins. Today marks the first day of active construction at the secondary outpost. I assemble the modular floor panels, secure insulation sheets, and anchor temporary support beams. Dust is everywhere, sticking to every surface, but progress is visible. By evening, the skeleton of the shelter is standing, and I feel the first real sense of expansion beyond the main habitat. Each stone moved, each panel secured, is a step toward making Mars habitable. Expansion isn't just construction. It's hope in action. Day 86, outpost completion. Prep. Today, I focus on finishing the secondary outpost structure. The walls are secured, insulation checked, and internal compartments arranged for emergency supplies, tools, and temporary living quarters. I also set up portable solar panels to power essential systems. This is the first time you'll have a functional satellite base away from the main habitat, allowing multi-day operations farther into the Martian terrain. Day 87. Outpost systems test. I run a full systems check at the secondary outpost. Power is stable oxygen levels within safe margins and temperature control functions correctly. I spend extra time testing the emergency backup units, simulating power failures and oxygen drops. Everything performs within expected tolerances. I take notes for potential improvements, but this outpost is officially functional. Day 88. Greenhouse at full production. Back at the main habitat, the greenhouse reaches a critical milestone. Seedlings planted over the last month are thriving and the first trays of greens are ready for regular harvests. I schedule daily maintenance and monitoring to maximize output. Watering, light exposure, and nutrient levels are adjusted to maintain steady growth. With proper care, these plants could sustain a significant portion of my diet. For the coming months, Day 89, long-range rover exploration. I take the rover on a multi-day reconnaissance mission beyond the previously mapped ridge. I collect soil and mineral samples, identify potential building sites, and test rover performance over rougher terrain. The journey is exhausting, but it provides invaluable data for future outposts. On returning, I upload all information to the onboard AI for analysis and mark promising locations for Days 95-100 exploration. Day 90, reflection on 3 months. 90 days on Mars. The initial shock has faded. I have a functional main habitat, a productive greenhouse, and now a secondary outpost. The plants are growing, the rovers are reliable, and my understanding of this environment has deepened significantly. I take a moment to gaze at the horizon, a pale blue dot Earth, barely visible in the distance. Mars is no longer a place of mere survival. It is a landscape of progress, exploration, and growing possibility. Each day builds upon the last, creating a life where there was none. Day 91, resource consolidation. Today, I consolidate supplies between the main habitat and the secondary outpost. I check oxygen reserves, water storage, and emergency rations, making sure both locations can operate independently if needed. I also organize the sample storage from recent exploration trips, ensuring nothing is lost or damaged. Proper resource management is critical. Mistakes now could compromise long-term survival. Day 92. Advanced greenhouse trials. I introduce experimental nutrient mixes to several trays in the greenhouse, testing variations in growth, speed, and resilience. Some seedlings respond well while others show signs of stress. The data collected today will guide crop management for months to come. I also rotate trays to optimize light exposure, ensuring even growth across the expanded greenhouse. Day 93. Long-range survey. Prep. Preparing for a more ambitious rover mission. I plot a route extending 10 kilometers from the habitat, targeting unexplored terrain with potential mineral and water sites. I pack additional oxygen canisters, portable solar panels, and extra food rations. The goal is to expand the colony's operational range and identify future expansion zones. Day 94. Extended rover expedition. The rover expedition begins. I navigate rough terrain, collect mineral samples, and test new tools for soil analysis. The journey is physically and mentally demanding. Dust storms in the distance remind me of the planet's unpredictability. Data collection is the priority, but I also monitor the rover's energy levels closely. After several hours, I set up temporary markers to return tomorrow for detailed study. Day 95. I review all data from the past 95 days, noting successes, failures, and lessons learned. The colony has evolved from survival mode to strategic growth mode. I take a moment to reflect. Mars is harsh, but I've adapted, and the systems I've built are sustainable for long-term habitation. 95 days. In the mission is no longer just a test of endurance. It is a blueprint for life beyond Earth Day. 96. Multi-point outpost coordination. Today, I focus on integrating the main habitat and secondary outpost operations. I test communication links, power sharing protocols, and emergency response procedures. The goal is to ensure both sites can function independently while supporting each other. I also perform a full inventory check, ensuring rations, oxygen, and water reserves are balanced. The colony is now operating as a small, coordinated network rather than isolated units. Day 97. Full greenhouse harvest. The greenhouse reaches a critical milestone. I conduct a full harvest, collecting all mature crops. The yield is enough to sustain me for several weeks without relying on stored rations. I rotate trays, plant new seeds, and record growth data for future optimization. This is the first time Mars has provided a nearly self-sufficient food source under human management. Day 98. Long-range expedition wrap-up. I revisit the markers from the expedition on day 94. Detailed soil and mineral analysis is conducted, confirming the location suitable for future expansion. I take additional samples for potential water extraction experiments. The rover's performance remains excellent, and my confidence in multi-day missions has increased. With these results, I can plan longer-term exploration and settlement strategies. Day 99. Reflection and mental check. I spend the day reflecting on the psychological journey. 99 days on Mars have taught me resilience, patience, and adaptability. Isolation, extreme conditions, and constant vigilance have shaped not just survival skills, but also a mindset suited for long-term extraterrestrial habitation. I record a private log summarizing lessons learned, emotional milestones, and operational strategies. Day 100. Conclusion of the first 100 days. Plains stretch endlessly, but I see progress. The greenhouse thriving, the secondary outpost functional, and data for future expansion carefully logged. Mars has transformed from an alien challenge into a lived experience. I take one last moment to reflect. 100 days on Mars, survival was only the beginning. Exploration, adaptation, and creation were the true milestones. This planet is harsh, but it has become a canvas for human ingenuity and resilience. The first 100 days are complete, but the journey of building life here has only just begun.